Okay, let's see if I can get this to work now. Oh my goodness. Okay, I think I'm here and I have a chat. It's amazing. I love it when stuff actually works. Wait a minute. Oh no, it says sign into chat. Um, What is that about? Let's see here. If I can fix that. It's been nothing but weird computer problems lately. So we'll see how this goes today. So hi everybody. Nice to be here. I can't see any of my cameras right now because I'm trying to figure out my chat, but we're going to do Houndstooth today. So, I mean, I guess we'll see how that goes. Yeah, so let's see. It's bringing me chat in a completely separate box. Every time I do this, it's something new. So, I don't know. I guess we'll see how this goes. Okay, so here's my Houndstooth. I did a couple samples so you could see what it looks like. I mean, everybody's pretty much familiar with this pattern. It's really popular in fashion, things like that. Actually, I think it's experiencing a comeback because I have seen a lot of people wearing Houndstooth clothing, especially if you see, I don't know if anybody's seen these, the coats with the big Houndstooth pattern, like the biggest you've ever seen, like Houndstooth, like the size of my hand on these coats, like extra big stuff. So, oh, my voice is low. Does it sound any better now? I feel like every time I do this, especially because I use my computer for Spinning Guild, and Nicole, let me know if it sounds like you can hear me or if I sound really low. But usually when I take my computer to Spinning Guild, I have to do all these things and change all these things as we're running our Zoom for anything that we do audiovisual for. And sometimes things just don't seem to work the same. So I'm still trying to get a handle on it. Yes. What does yes mean? Like it sounds better? I hope it does. Oh my goodness. Off to a great start again. Last time I had to edit 5 minutes off the front of the video because there was no picture. You guys, I know the people out there, my friends, think I'm really good at this. Oh, okay. As long as it's better, I could turn like the volumes up all the way and we'll see how it goes. So let's keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. All right. So I did a couple samples of the Houndstooth. And for this particular sample, I used Miss Bab's commercial yarn in a solid and then a tonal. So you can see like there are some like weird color things going on in here, which I like. I think it makes the patterns interesting. So you can kind of see right here where it goes across and where some of it's lighter. And then I did this small one right before I started the live. And this is a combination of hand spun in this aqua and commercial yarn in this like dark teal color. And it actually has a really interesting effect because the hand spun yarn is thicker than the commercial yarn. I really like this one. It's very interesting. So we're going to learn this today. So Houndstooth, it's 2-color. So you'll need 2 different colors of yarn. Like I said, I'm going to make this basically the same one. So I'm using Miss Bab's yarn. Is this Yummy? It might be. I want to say it's like maybe a light worsted. So it comes out pretty dense, and you can see the pattern very clearly in this. So my recommendation would be light color, dark color. But, you know, choose your own adventure. You're not going to want to do a solid for this because you won't see the pattern. I don't know what a variegated would look like with this because I haven't tried it. So, you know, do your own thing. But for this, obviously, going to do 2 colors. So there's a specific way to warp the loom. We're going to start with, this is going to be the gray, is going to be color number 1. And then this coral color is going to be color number 2. And I'm doing this on the big loom. So there's probably going to be a section of this video where I'm just talking about what I did this weekend as I do it, and you can just watch. Because the pattern itself is not hard as long as you get a handle on there's like a couple of specifics that you need to just remember in your brain. Everything else super easy. So we're going to start with warping the loom. Starting with color number 1, I put it in this corner here to hold it for now. We're going to go where corner number 1, if you have an arrow on your loom, you're going to go through here. So right where the arrow is. Up here at corner number 3, we have 2 pins. You're going to wrap around the first pin. Okay. You're going to come back down and you're going to go in between pins 1 and 2 down here. And then you're going to wrap around the 3 pins here. So the pattern for color number 1 as you're warping this is you're going to go around at the top, around the first pin, and then you're going to come down and around 3 pins. Okay? Around the first pin, down, around 3 pins, back up, first pin, down, around all 3 pins. And you're going to continue this to the end. And you're going to want something to hold your yarn at the end here. I have a couple different options here. I have my handy dandy clip that you've seen in previous videos, but I also grabbed myself some tape. So I have different types of tape here. So if I need to tape something down, I can. And you'll see that once I start warping the second color, I'm going to secure both of them down here with tape, because while this little notch here is great for 1 strand of yarn, it's not great for 2. So we're going to end right here. That's color number 1. And we're going to secure it either with tape, with a clip, however you want to do it. I'm just going to wrap it around like that and just clip it real quick, just so it stays, because we only have so many hands. This is where we bring in color number 2. And for this, I'm going to stick, I want to say for the tail, leave like a 6-inch tail when you're starting. Mine's probably not quite 6 inches, but you know, do as I say, not as I do. Okay, so I put them both through the notch and I'm going to secure them down with a piece of tape. Now, color number 2 is going to go in between pins 2 and 3 right down here. And it's going to be similar to how we warped color number 1, but the pins we go around will be different, okay? You'll see what I mean in just a second. So we're going to go around the second pin because we only have 2 pins here. So keep that in mind. And then we're going to come between pins 3 and 4 down here. So basically we're splitting this loop that goes around all 3 pins. We're going to be splitting that loop. So when we come up to do the second round here, we're going to go up between pins 1 and 2. We're going to wrap around the 3rd pin, come back down, go between 2 and 3. So you're splitting the loop that's down here. Okay. So we'll continue that across, go up through 1 and 2, around pin number 3 at the top, back down through 2 and 3, up through 1 and 2, around pin number 3 at the top, back down between 2 and 3, and continue this until you get to the end. I'm trying not to pull it too tight, but you know, some of us are like, have it rough with the stress. So, you know, if you pull it too tight, it's no big deal. You'll be fine. Okay, so notice that I have 2 pins down here at the bottom, okay? and I've got 4 pins up here at the top. What I did was I split this loop down here in the previous, and then here's where my yarn is coming down. I am going to go right on the other side of that pin, since we only have those 2 pins, so between pins 1 and 2. I'm going to go around pin number 3 at the top, and I'm going to come down between the same pins. So it's a little squishy right here at the end. And if you need to see it, that's what it looks like. Okay. So I've gotten to the end here. I've got my color 1 already clamped down. I'm going to clamp this down, the color number 2, just for a moment, because then what we're going to do at this particular stage, now this is all we need to do for the warping. And just like the twill, we're only warping in one direction, and then we're going to be weaving in the opposite direction using both the colors, and I'll show you that in just a moment. But at this particular stage, what I would do is I would secure both of your yarns down at the bottom, and because I'm working on balls of yarn here, you want to make your life easy and just do both of these at the same time. You can do them at different times before you start each color, but you know, why bother? So you're going to take both of your yarns and you're going to wrap them around, like I'm just going to kind of like loosely hold it here at the corner, wrap them around 4.5 times. So here we go. 1, here we go, pass number 2, I'll hold that down, pass number 3, hold that down, pass number 4.5-ish, cut that, there we go. Now we're free from our yarn balls. Okay, so now here is the part that is very, very important. Like I said, most of this is very easy, but if you goof this part up, you might have a little problem. So here are my 2 colors. Let me hold them down so I can keep them kind of taut. My color number 1, the gray, is here. Color number 2 is here. I'm not even going to bother to put the needle on color number 2 yet, but color number 2 is going to be the first one we weave with. That's the coral color, the one we just warped. Before we put it on the needle, what I want you to do, here's that gray one. You want to take your coral yarn and pass it underneath that gray one. So you're going to have a twist here. What you're doing, so you can see, it was, let me do that again. It was like this. You're going to take the coral one and you're going to wrap it underneath the gray one, however it makes sense to you. So it's like this and wrapped underneath it, okay? So with that being done, I'm going to take my handy dandy clip, or take some tape if you have it, and secure color number 1 down, because we will be weaving with color number 2 first, and that's the coral color. This pass is a super easy pass because you only have to remember one pattern. So with that being said, I have it underneath my gray one right there. How you start, and make sure, because we have these 2 squished together, you want to make sure that you're going underneath the right ones. So you're going to go under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, all the way across. Now, Stacy, when we were doing twill, you said we had to make sure we were locking these in place. And yes, I did say that. And as you can see, because it almost looks like you're not locking them in place, you actually are. I'll show you in just a second. As soon as I get this through here, And I like to pick up my loom and like manipulate it and stuff. So, I mean, if that helps you get the needle through, because sometimes when you're playing with it, it wants to kind of arc this way, right? I'll play with the fabric. I'll stick my fingers, move things up and down. I manipulate it a lot. So don't be afraid of that. Okay. So with that being said, you can see where my needle is. And while one side is not locked together, it is locking in the front part of these loops. So once you get them together, it's not going to be a floppy mess like you would have had with the twill because you're doing stuff in a certain way. The more yarn you put into this particular pattern, the less you'll see this, but you will, in the interest of, transparency, this is what that side looks like. But it's stuck together. It's not going to come apart like if you were weaving and these, completely came apart. It is, that's not going to fall apart on you. So you're okay. But that is what the one end is going to look like. Okay. So under, over, all the way across, ending. Let me see. Did I do this right? Under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, under, oh, there it is. I'm like, whoopsies. When I'm talking, sometimes I'm not always paying attention to what I'm doing. The last warp. Ooh. The last warp is going to be an over. So I knew I made a mistake because it was under. So you're under, over, all the way across, ending in and over. Okay. So that's our first pass. I'm going to go ahead and flip this over like this because my right hand's my dominant hand and I'm going to yank it through. Oh, yikes. What is that? Stacy. Getting knots and stuff already. That's... Yay. Let's see if I can get this apart. Just using my fingers and not splitting my yarn too much. It's like, what did I do? There we go. Okay. So there we go. And I tugged it so it makes sure to, tighten up, the last row of the warping right there. Okay. And so now as we go across, and like I said, this is going to take a little time because I'm using the bigger loom and not the smaller loom. I wanted to make sure that it was a little bit easier to understand. I felt like it was a little bit easier to understand on the big loom since most people are using a 4-inch loom. So we're going to keep doing it the same way. And we are going to, let me see where I went here. Boop, 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 boop. I goofed that up too. Okay, so we go around, you're going around the first pin. Okay. On this side, you're going to be going around 3 pins. So it's very similar to how we warped it. Under, over, under, over, under, over, under, over, all the way across. And if I don't talk too much, then maybe I won't goof it up. Sometimes, paying attention and all that. It's rough. Okay. So there, under, over, all the way across, ending in an over. We're going to pull this through, although this is my non-dominant hand. So that's what it looks like right there. Okay, so you're going around the 3 pins. On this side, you're going around the first pin. So let's turn it back around. And I can, tug it a little bit more. Zhuzh it, do whatever you want. Sorry about my dogs. Under, over, all the way across. We're waiting for the mail to come, and usually the dogs are like, hey, mail lady, where are you at? Come see us so we can bark at you through the door, because that's what we like to do. Make it sound like we're big, tough dogs. They're not. They're very short. Okay. Bloop, 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 bloop. Okay. So there I wrapped it around pin number 1. Coming back to this side, we're going to go around the 3 pins. Again, under, over, all the way across. So like I said, this is the part that is like a little time consuming, but like I said, I wanted you to see it on the big loom so that when you're working it, it makes a little bit more sense to you. I did the small blue version on the tiny loom, and I'm like, oh, this is like, I'm maybe warping like 3 times. So it was so not a big deal. And I wasn't sure if people were gonna understand from just the real quick, you know, back and forth. At least this way you get a little bit of repetition in here. And as in my opinion, this is probably the easiest of the passes. When we go through with color number 1, that pass is a little bit more tricky. Also because you already have yarn in here. So one of the things that happens is that you have to kind of like really pull it through because there's more tension. Okay, under, over. Oh, now they're barking at the neighbor dogs. They're like, oh, we want to play. That's what life is like in my house. Usually it's a lot more loud, but I do have my kids here who are trying to shush the dogs a little bit. So now that they're home from school. Okay. Oh, and I forgot to say Merry Christmas. Today is March 24th and my Christmas tree is still up. I'm sure everyone has noticed. That is my own personal thing I've got going on here for our topsy-turvy world. I'm keeping my Christmas tree up probably all year. We'll see. I have my mom, who I don't know if she's still here, but she was on the thing, and she's going to be coming to visit with my dad, so the tree will probably still be up then. So don't expect the tree will be down by then, unless I have a massive change of heart. So here we go, under. Remember, you're always starting with an under, ending with an over. And it's kind of like doing the plain weave all the way across, you know, over, under, over, under. So it's super not hard. When we start getting into weird little things, it's on the next pass for color number 1, which is the gray color. And then there's a little bit you need to remember, but not a lot. And if I can do this, like anybody can do it, let's be real. So it's not super hard. And it is a fun effect. I think like out of all of the squares that I've made so far, I think that the Houndstooth ones are my favorite by far. It's just interesting, and not a lot of people see that in like small woven pieces. I'm trying to figure out all the different things I can make with these squares. So, you know, I'm always Christmas part 2 in June. Yeah. That's my life right now. So cool things to make out of squares. If you go onto Pinterest, there are tons of ideas of things you can make with squares. Some of the smaller items, if you're into just making, you want to be like a quick, like one and done type situation. If you make 3 of these squares and put them together, stack them, like fold them like this and stack them in opposite directions, you can make a Christmas tree ornament. I've made those and sold those at Guild. My intention for some of these little squares, the tiny ones, is to make tiny little chickens, because chickens are apparently real hot right now. Like, who knew? I guess that's because we can't get our eggs. So yeah, chickens are hot. You can make clothes out of them. I actually have a couple books that I got for Christmas from my mom, on different patterns, mostly motifs, like oh, I'm gonna make a square that's got a owl motif in it or something like that. But also there was another book, I can show it to you in just a second, that has actual patterns done with the squares. I mean, think of it this way: anything you can make granny squares with. You want to make a granny square chicken, you want to make a granny square, I don't know, what other animals are they working on now? Some of the granny square animals I've seen have been more like people who are making like little hexies or whatever. But yeah, anything you can make granny squares out of, you can make these out of. Okay, so we've gotten to close to the end here. As you can see, I only have 2 pins here. So going around on the 2-4 side, going around the first pin, I'm going to go around these 2 pins over here, and we're going to do under over all the way across, but just around the 2 pins, obviously, because I don't have 3 there. And this is where, because it, you know, it's getting tighter, you have to kind of manipulate it a little bit. So under, over, under, over, under, over, and you're gonna go through this little space. So there we go. Looks like that. Oh, patches. Yeah, that'd be good too. Everybody's like, look, I made coffee, like mug rugs. And I'm like, you could do so much more than mug rugs, guys. Come on now. Let's be for real. Okay. So that's what the first pass looks like. It's not much to look at right now. But, and as you can see, I didn't weave the ends in on these because I may be sewing them together. We'll see how it goes. You do you. You want to weave in your ends. I usually do weave in my ends. I'm not on these because I'm feeling a little lazy. And I might be using some of these as examples for the next stream. So, okay. So now we're going to move to color number 1, which is our gray color. I'm going to unlatch it and see it's locked in there because we went underneath this and then back through. So I don't have to worry too much about losing any kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's going to still say taut, right? Okay, so for color number 1, we're going to go, and it's very similar to how we warped it. We're going to be going in between these colors here. Okay, so there's 2 different pattern, I use the word pattern loosely, but 2 different passes for this. On the 2 and 4 side, when you're coming from the 2 and 4 side, this is corner number 2, this is corner number 4. You're going to go over, under, across, okay? When you're coming from the 1-3 side, there's a special little thing you need to do in order to lock these in place. And it's going to be under, over, but you're not going under the first warp thread. You're going under the loop. And I'll show that to you in just a moment. So for the first pass, coming from the 2-4 side, we're going to go around here. Actually, I'm going to go through here because I'm going to need to come back through this right here. So we're going to go in between 1 and 2, and it's a little tight, but we're going to go over, under, all the way across. And like I said, this is the tougher pass because all of these warp and your weft has made these gaps tighter. So as you can see, I have my needle in here and it's starting to drift this way. This is why I use my fingers to manipulate where I'm going with this. So you'll see, like, I'll stick my finger underneath and I'll kind of push it down so that the needle stays straight. My needles curve, so hey, you know, good times. All right, and I can judge that a little bit later. But so I've gotten all the way through. I'm getting to the last one. We're going to go under the warp and over the loop. Right there. Under this warp, over the loop. And then we're going to... Oh, boy. All right. Then we're going to pull it through. Try not to make too big of a mess. And then I'm going to take the end of my needle, and this is where it's like, hey, let's zhuzh this a little bit so I can make some room for the next pass to go through. Okay, so went through there. We're going to go around this number 2 pin. And like I said, we're coming from the 1 and 3 side now. So if you don't have your loom numbered, or you don't have some indicator as to where the corners are, I would say it's probably beneficial to at least label the number 1 corner so you know where to start. But we're on 1 and 3 here. And so for the 1 and 3 pass, we're going to go under. Let's see if I can bring it up to the camera a little bit better here. We're going to go under this loop and then over, and then under, over, all the way across. So you want to go under that loop, and that'll help lock things in. Because the last thing you want is to, like, make this beautiful houndstooth square and you're like, oh, I'm so excited, it's the most beautiful thing I've ever made, and then pop it off the loom and it just, like, falls apart. Let's not be that person. Nobody wants that. That would be so sad, and we don't want to be sad. We need things that bring us joy. Okay, you're going through the space here between pins, so the gap. Turn it around here, spin it around, pull it through. And man, my needles, like I'm like warping all my needles. But, you know, I figure that's par for the course because you're putting it through something tight and it wants to bend itself. So as you can see here from the end, the act of going over the loop and then back under the loop when you're making the pass from the 1 and 3 side locks this in right here. So now we're going to go back around here. And so we are going around these pins so we can be in between these 2 passes of color number 2. Let's do that. Okay. So we're coming from our 2 and 4 side. We're going to go over, under. All the way across. Like I said, this is where I like to sort of use my fingers to guide the needle a little bit. And if I had more fingernails, it'd be a little bit easier, but use it to kind of zhuzh it back into that space. So we're going in between pins 1 and 2 over here. Turn it around and pull. So there we are. I'm going to zhuzh these apart a little bit like that. We're on the 1 and 3 side now. We want to go start with an under with that loop and over the first warp thread, and then do that all the way across. Sometimes I wish, like, I could just mount that camera to my forehead. It would make life so much easier. Be like, this is exactly what I'm looking at right now. Okay, through the gap. Gonna turn it around. I'm gonna pull it through. Now, as you can see, I mean, it's even harder to pull through because these are causing it to tighten up. The more weaving you do through the warp threads, the tighter those threads are going to get to each other. Okay, so now we're back on side 2 and 4. We're going to go over under. And before you guys think it's like, oh my gosh, Stacy, how do you do this? Like, how do you remember all this stuff? No joke. I'm looking at the, I don't know if you guys can see my eyes moving as I'm looking at this every pass, because I am the type of person who will say something and get completely lost in thought and forget where I was. And that would be really bad for a video. It might be funny, but it probably wouldn't be very good. Okay, so we've gone all the way through. Pull our yarn through. Ooh, sometimes it gets curled up. Just make sure that you're, moving it around enough that it's going through the right pins. There we go. Move this over a little bit. We're going to go around that. We're going to go under the loop, over the warp thread, all the way across. And I mean, once you get the hang of it and you do a bunch of them all together, it's like any pattern, like any knitting pattern or whatever. Like, let's say you're making a sweater and it's your first time making a sweater with this particular pattern. Now, not a lot of knitters will make multiple sweaters. I mean, well, I take that back. Maybe some do. In the past, I have never been that person that has made multiple sweaters. But recently, I did make 2 of the ranunculus sweaters. So I guess I've sort of changed my opinion on that. And the thing is like the first time you knit the ranunculus, okay, yeah, like you're getting the hang of it, so you really don't know what the heck's going on. But once you do the second one, you fly through it. I mean, it's not really that hard of a pattern, but yeah, like you don't even have to think about it. It's just easy peasy. So the more you do it, the easier it's going to be. The more you'll remember. Like I said, in the interest of transparency, I had to give myself a refresher earlier today because I haven't done this in a while and I didn't want to make too many mistakes while I was working on it, so I didn't have to waste anyone's time. So, but now that I've done it a few times, I'm like, oh, wait a minute, this is no big deal. Sometimes I get really intimidated over things that I've done a million times. I don't know what that is. Like, seaming up toes of socks or heels of socks or whatever. I can never remember. Okay, so going under the loop, over the warp thread. I know I'm saying that over and over again, but that's the important part. So it's not hard. It's just you have to remember, like, lock the corner, so you don't have your stuff get all weird and loosey-goosey. When you're doing color number 2, it's slightly different than when you do color number 1. Color number 1 is the one that has, is different each pass, really. You start with your over-under coming from one side and you do under-over coming from the other. But it looks so nice. Like, and if you have tonals at home or hand spun, I think that it produces really interesting effects depending on what you use. Now, one of the things I mentioned at the beginning is that I haven't done this with a variegated yarn. Like, not like, how do I want to put this? Like, I don't know what it would look like if, like, let's say you had one color and it was just a variegated yarn and it just changed colors periodically or whatever. You could do that. It would be interesting to see what the results were. I mean, I think that the one thing you'd probably have to take into consideration is the warping. Yeah, I guess the warping and the weaving would be a little bit different in that instead of warping with 2 colors, you're warping with one yarn or whatever. So yeah, I haven't tried that. Maybe you would still do 2 yarns, but have them be like the same color of variegated yarn. I don't know. I was just thinking about that before I started, and I thought that might produce a very interesting effect. Because you have so many different colors in it, you would obviously have multiple colors that would pass over each other and then create the actual houndstooth pattern. But I suppose it depends on the yarn. It depends on, how you're doing it. Personally, I think the tonals look really nice with a solid, which is what this is. So, I have a solid gray, and then I have the tonal of the coral, which I want to say, I don't think this is the one that's called deep sea jellyfish, but it was, I know that one of the ones I bought was called deep sea jellyfish, but I still have another skein in my stash. So, and the skein that I have in my stash actually coordinates with, the coral color that I have here. It's got that color in it. And I had used these yarns to double knit a cowl. I don't know, what would you call it? I mean, I guess it's kind of like a cowl. It's like a loop, and it has an octopus on it. So, okay. Oh, Nebby, so loud today. There's like a little yappy dog next door, and this dog loves to bark, and it just aggravates my dogs so much because they're like, who is that, and why can I hear you? You're not in my house. Yeah. Corgis are fun, but they are loud. They're very talky. And probably make pretty decent guard dogs, if I'm being honest, because like my one corgi, my cardigan corgi Namor, he can have a really deep bark, so he sounds like a much bigger dog than he is, even though he is a really big boy. But he's also like the one who cries and whines and like, why can't I have food right now? So, okay, there we go. It's getting tighter and tighter the closer we get to the end. Here's that. Try to zhuzh these apart a little bit. Hopefully I'm keeping it fairly in camera. There we go. Go under the loop and over the warp thread. So I was saying I was going to tell everybody about my weekend. We had Spinning Guild this weekend, and I've been doing some embroidery. Like I'm doing everything except for the things I probably should be doing, which is making frogs and working on the raccoon pattern that I'm trying to write. But I also got the opportunity to hit some, we have a water, what would you call it, a fountain in our backyard that's never worked. And it's like basically just a big old piece of concrete plaster or whatever. And I got to hit it with a sledgehammer, and it was really awesome. Because I'm trying to get it out of there so I can make room for what's going to be my future pumpkin patch and squash patch. So I received some seeds from somebody online who actually we used to work together, but we don't really know each other so much. But she left a bunch of seeds with one of my friends who was my dealer. And so now I have a bunch of seeds, and I'm going to start planting for my garden. And so I'm trying to get everything ready. But one of the things that I have to do, because we've been having some people out to rebuild our retaining wall that fell over in the winds, I had to smash this thing. So I smashed it. And now it's just the base. So we'll see what happens next. Okay. So here we've gotten to close to the end. So as you can see, I did the over under coming back from the 2/4 side. And what I did was I split these 2 pins over here. Now I'm going to be coming back for one more pass, and it's just going to be really tight on this end. So I wanted to make you aware. So it might be a little bit difficult to see, but so right now I split the 2 pins. This is my pass coming from the 2/4 side. Okay. There we go. And so now what I need to do is I need to come back around. But this part is also one of those things where it's like, okay, make sure you're paying attention. All right, so this is gonna be the last pass with this color. You can see the loop is around the 2 pins here. What I wanna do is I wanna go under that loop, okay? But I don't wanna, since I'm going around this pin here, it gets a little tricky. So you're gonna wanna make sure you're just catching that when you start going across, and then over the first warp thread, and then under, and then across. And as you can see, the yarn is really close together, so it's going to be a little tight. That's why I keep like moving this around so I can kind of like manipulate it a little bit. And we're going to go around here, around here. Real tight. Okay, let's get it down. And sometimes it helps just push the needle up, push the needle down. There we go. So I'm underneath that loop, gonna pull it through, and that's our last pass. It's gonna be tight. Before you start yanking and yanking and yanking, just grab your end, pull it through. There you go. So this is what it looks like. This is the finished piece. That actually didn't take as long as I thought it was going to take, so that's good to know. And here I have my ends out. Everything's locked in because it's, you know, stuck together. And then you can either weave in the ends or you can just pop it off here. So there you go. There's your houndstooth. And because when you take it off the loom, everything kind of squishes in a little bit more. It's kind of nice because then I feel like you don't get an idea of the pattern so much when it's on the loom, as like once you take it off the loom and everything kind of does this and relaxes a little bit. So, and then here you can see that's the edge where we went through half of it to lock it in. So you will have a little floppy there. But if you're taking these and you're planning on sewing them together, it's not going to be that big of a deal. You'll be fine. You know, you could easily cover it with a crocheted join, or, you know, with whatever you're using to attach it, or if you're sewing it even. But yeah, that's what it looks like. And like I said, they look really good. If you have a tonal yarn and a solid, it has this very interesting effect. Like, I feel like the camera on these doesn't really do it justice, because this orangey coral watermelony red color is like, it goes through so many different sort of iterations in this skein. And while like this one, you can see where the dark parts kind of met in one area, and this one, let's see, the dark part's like here and then a little bit here. So it's interesting because you kind of get like, it's just a little something to make it different. So yeah, so that's Houndstooth. And next week, what I'm planning, I'm very nervous. Next week I'm planning to show you how to join some of these together, whether it's sewing or crochet. So if you have some squares around, make sure you bring them, and I can show you a couple different ways on how to put these together. Probably not so much the sewing part. Sewing's probably pretty self-explanatory, but if you're not familiar with crochet or different types of joins, you know, we'll see how that works. So that's it for today, and hopefully you made made a fun square, and hopefully you'll make a second, and if you feel so inclined, maybe you can make a chicken too, because I think these would be really cute as little chickens. And you know, it's kind of like you attach it like this, and then you take this end and you like squish it the opposite direction, and then you end up with a cute little chicken shape. So anyway, oh, another thing you can use these for, if you're a sewist or quilter, I know Nicole's a quilter, you probably could, if they're dense enough, fill them with beans or something and make pattern weights. That's a thought. And you can probably make the pattern weights the same way you make them to join them together for the chickens. So let me just go over that real quick. You would sew around this way, this way, this way, and then with this open bit, you would like open it up and then sew it that way and make it like a little 3-dimensional bean bag, if that makes sense. So anyway, they might make some pretty good pattern weights for sewing. So hope you guys